John Adams was born on October 30th, 1735, in the town of Braintree, Massachusetts, now known as Quincy. He grew up in a modest but respected New England family whose character deeply shaped his future political identity. His father, Deacon John Adams Sr., was a farmer, a shoemaker, and an active church leader within the local congregational community. His mother, Susanna Boylston Adams, came from a prominent Boston-area family known for its considerable involvement in public affairs and medicine. Adams spent his early years in a small farmhouse surrounded by fields, orchards, and the rhythms of rural life. His father placed enormous value on education, believing that learning could open doors unavailable through wealth alone. This conviction ensured that John and his brothers were given opportunities to study far beyond the average colonial youth. Even as a child, Adams showed a restless intelligence and a strong sense of independence. He enjoyed exploring the outdoors, hunting birds with homemade slings, and assisting his father on the farm. School, however, did not initially excite him. He often found the strict discipline and heavy religious emphasis dull compared with the freedom of the fields. Despite this, his father's insistence and Adams's growing recognition that education was vital gradually steered him toward more serious study. By the age of 9, Adams had already begun to sense the competing forces that would define much of his life: duty versus desire, intellect versus instinct, ambition versus modesty. His early years forged within him a lasting appreciation for hard work, honesty, and civic responsibility, values that would remain central throughout his legal, political, and diplomatic career. John Adams began formal schooling in Braintree, where he studied Latin, arithmetic, and classical literature. At first, he disliked academic life and often dreamed of becoming a farmer or a sailor instead. But under both parental pressure and the guidance of dedicated local teachers, Adams gradually discovered a growing interest in learning. His father, determined to offer his son opportunities he never had, enrolled John in the Braintree Latin School. Here, Adams encountered rigorous classical training, learning Greek and Latin texts by authors such as Cicero, Virgil, and Sallust. These classical works fostered his lifelong fascination with republican ideals, political virtue, and civic obligation. In 1751, at only 15 years old, Adams was admitted to Harvard College, one of the most respected institutions in the colonies. At Harvard, he excelled intellectually and gained exposure to Enlightenment philosophy. He read works by Locke, Montesquieu, and other European thinkers who emphasized natural rights, personal liberty, and limited government. These ideas would profoundly shape his later political philosophy. Adams supported himself at Harvard by tutoring younger students and taking on small jobs, experiences that taught him responsibility and leadership. He graduated in 1755, ranking high in his class, and delivered a commencement speech that reflected both his ambition and his growing interest in public service. This period of education transformed Adams from a reluctant student into a thoughtful and disciplined intellectual. Harvard not only broadened his worldview, but also prepared him for the legal and political paths that would later define his role in American history. After graduating from Harvard, Adams began his professional life as a schoolteacher in Worcester, Massachusetts. Though teaching provided financial stability, he quickly realized it was not the career he wanted. His restless ambition and desire for greater influence led him to explore other options. During these years, Adams kept a personal diary, one that would eventually become an invaluable historical document. His entries reveal a young man grappling with questions of purpose, ambition, and morality. He admired public figures who shaped society through law and politics, and he increasingly felt drawn to these spheres. It was during his time in Worcester that Adams first considered studying law. Influenced by classical writings and Enlightenment thinkers, he came to see the legal profession as a path toward public leadership. By 1756, he began reading law under the guidance of James Putnam, a respected Worcester attorney. Adams proved a gifted legal apprentice, quickly acquiring a reputation for hard work, sharp reasoning, and moral seriousness. In 1758, after 2 years of legal study, Adams was admitted to the Massachusetts bar. His admission marked a turning point. He had found his vocation. Adams understood that law would not only provide professional advancement, but also grant him a platform to influence public affairs. His early legal years laid the foundation for his later roles in the Continental Congress, diplomacy, and the shaping of American government. One of the most significant relationships of John Adams's life began when he met Abigail Smith, the daughter of a minister in Weymouth, Massachusetts. Abigail, intelligent, well-read, and sharply insightful, was unlike most women of her era. She possessed a deep interest in politics, literature, and philosophy, qualities that would make her not only Adams's wife, but also his most trusted advisor. The couple married on October 25, 1764, beginning a lifelong partnership marked by mutual respect and intellectual equality. Their marriage produced 5 children: Abigail, Nabby; John Quincy, later the 6th President of the United States; Susanna, Charles, and Thomas Boylston. Throughout their married life, the Adamses maintained a remarkable correspondence, especially during periods of political turmoil that kept John away from home for months or even years at a time. Their letters provide a candid, richly detailed picture of both their personal affection and their shared political concerns. Their household in Braintree, later Quincy, became a lively center of family activity, farming, and legal work. Abigail managed the home with exceptional skill, often taking on responsibilities beyond those traditionally assigned to women, such as financial decisions and farm management during John's long absences. These years also witnessed Adams's growing political involvement as tensions between the American colonies and Britain intensified. His legal career flourished, and his reputation as a principled, knowledgeable, and courageous attorney spread widely. Meanwhile, Abigail's support became essential to his success. Their marriage served as a stabilizing force throughout the chaotic years leading up to the American Revolution. A defining moment in John Adams's early political career came in 1770 with the Boston Massacre. On March 5th, a confrontation between colonists and British soldiers escalated into violence, resulting in the deaths of 5 colonists. Public outrage swept through Boston, and the soldiers involved were arrested and placed on trial. Despite widespread anti-British sentiment, Adams agreed to defend the soldiers. He believed deeply in the principle that every accused person deserved a fair trial, regardless of public opinion. Adams's decision risked his reputation and political future, yet he accepted the challenge out of moral conviction. His defense was meticulous and grounded in evidence, not emotion. Adams argued that the soldiers acted in self-defense amid a hostile crowd. His closing remarks famously declared that facts are stubborn things, a statement that remains one of the most quoted lines in American legal history. The trial resulted in acquittals for most of the soldiers and lighter convictions for the rest. Adams's role in the case demonstrated his dedication to justice and cemented his reputation as one of the most principled lawyers in the colonies. This episode elevated Adams to a position of respect among moderates and radicals alike. He soon became more deeply involved in local politics, serving in the Massachusetts House of Representatives and later as a delegate to the First Continental Congress. His work during these years positioned him as a leading advocate for colonial rights and prepared him for the enormous responsibilities he would shoulder during the American Revolution. John Adams's entry into the Continental Congress marked the beginning of his central role in the struggle for American independence. In 1774, as tensions with Britain escalated, Massachusetts selected Adams as one of its delegates to the First Continental Congress in Philadelphia. His reputation for integrity, legal expertise, and patriotic commitment made him a natural choice. At Congress, Adams quickly emerged as one of the most active and influential members. He served on numerous committees and played a leading role in shaping the colony's collective response to British policies. Although many delegates still sought reconciliation with Britain, Adams argued that the colonies must assert their rights and prepare for possible separation. When Congress reconvened in 1775 for its second session, the situation had worsened. Armed conflict had erupted in Massachusetts at Lexington and Concord. Adams now pushed firmly for organized resistance. He successfully nominated George Washington as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army, a decision that proved vital for the revolutionary cause. Adams's letters during this period reflect both his intellectual intensity and his belief that independence was not only inevitable but morally necessary. He spent long hours drafting petitions, debating strategy, and urging hesitant delegates to confront reality. Although not always a smooth diplomat, his manner could be blunt. Adams earned widespread respect for his clarity, diligence, and unwavering dedication. By early 1776, Adams had become a key figure in the movement toward independence. His work laid the political groundwork that would make separation possible. The stage was set for his next major role, helping shape the document that would announce American nationhood to the world. In June 1776, the Continental Congress appointed a committee of 5 to draft a declaration announcing the colony's intention to break from Britain. Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Roger Sherman, and Robert R. Livingston composed the committee. Although Jefferson served as the primary writer, Adams played a critical and often underappreciated role. Jefferson later recalled that Adams urged him to write the draft because of his peculiar felicity of expression, and because Adams believed that Jefferson's Virginian background gave the document broader political weight. Yet Adams was deeply involved in shaping the ideas behind the text. His earlier writings, including Thoughts on Government, had already established him as one of the most articulate defenders of natural rights and republicanism. After Jefferson completed the first draft, both Adams and Franklin reviewed it, suggesting edits that strengthened the language and clarified the argument. Adams then played one of his most important roles, defending the document during debate in Congress. Many delegates feared British retaliation or doubted the wisdom of a complete break. Adams delivered several powerful speeches advocating for independence, though no written versions survive. His passion was so intense that one delegate described him as the Atlas of Independence. On July 4, 1776, Congress formally approved the Declaration of Independence. While Jefferson received most of the public credit, Adams remained one of the primary intellectual forces behind the revolutionary vision it expressed. He later called that day the culmination of the greatest political question that ever was debated, noting that he felt he had done his duty to my maker and my country. The Declaration marked a turning point in Adams's life. He would now shift from forging independence to helping secure it through diplomacy and statecraft. As the Revolutionary War intensified, Congress recognized the need for foreign alliances, particularly with France. In 1777, Adams was appointed as a commissioner to Europe, beginning a long and demanding period of diplomatic service. His travels would take him to France, the Netherlands, and England, often under difficult and dangerous conditions. Adams faced challenges from the beginning. France found him less charming than Benjamin Franklin, whose smooth manner contrasted with Adams' blunt New England seriousness. Their clashing personalities complicated diplomatic efforts, and Adams struggled to find a clear role in Paris. Despite this, he worked diligently to secure loans, negotiate military support, and maintain communication with Congress. In 1780, Adams was sent to the Netherlands, where he achieved one of his greatest diplomatic successes. Through persistence, personal persuasion, and careful reasoning, he convinced the Dutch Republic to formally recognize the United States and to provide crucial financial loans. This achievement strengthened the American war effort and enhanced Adams' international reputation. Adams also played a decisive role in negotiating the Treaty of Paris of 1783, which ended the Revolutionary War. Working alongside Franklin and John Jay, Adams insisted on favorable terms for the new nation, including recognition of American independence and generous territorial boundaries. His insistence on negotiating directly with Britain, against French diplomatic pressure, proved essential to securing strong outcomes for the United States. Though often exhausted and frustrated by diplomatic life, Adams's work in Europe was indispensable. His efforts helped ensure American survival, financial stability, and legitimacy among world powers. By the time he returned home in 1783, he had earned a reputation as one of the country's most capable and principled statesmen. After the Treaty of Paris, John Adams continued to serve the new nation abroad. He remained in Europe to manage ongoing diplomatic matters, including commercial treaties and political relations with European powers. His experience and legal expertise made him one of America's most trusted envoys. In 1785, Congress appointed Adams as the first U.S. minister to Great Britain. The appointment carried enormous symbolic weight, for Adams would now represent the United States at the very court from which the colonies had declared independence only a decade earlier. When Adams presented his credentials to King George III, observers noted the quiet dignity of the moment. The king, though reserved, acknowledged Adams respectfully, telling him that he hoped the new nations would forget the past. Adams replied that he wished for mutual goodwill and peace. Despite this promising start, Adams's mission in Britain proved challenging. British officials remained reluctant to make major concessions, particularly on issues like trade restrictions and the withdrawal of British troops from frontier posts. Adams pressed tirelessly for improved relations, but he achieved only limited progress. During his years in London, Adams also continued his intellectual work. He wrote A Defense of the Constitutions of Government of the United States, a 3-volume exploration of political theory that defended the emerging American constitutional framework. His writings reflected a deep belief in checks and balances, mixed government, and the dangers of concentrated power. Adams returned to the United States in 1788 after more than a decade abroad. Though sometimes frustrated by diplomatic setbacks, he had strengthened the nation's standing and contributed significantly to its intellectual foundation. His return coincided with the ratification of the U.S. Constitution, setting the stage for his next great role in American government. With the establishment of the federal government under the new Constitution, the nation held its first presidential election in 1789. George Washington was unanimously chosen as the first president, and John Adams received the second highest number of electoral votes, making him the first vice president of the United States. He would hold this office for 2 terms, from 1789 to 1797. Adams approached the vice presidency with a mixture of pride and frustration. The Constitution gave the vice president limited responsibilities, mainly presiding over the Senate. Adams took this role seriously, often casting tie-breaking votes and helping shape early precedents for legislative procedure. His rulings demonstrated his legal expertise and commitment to constitutional order. Yet Adams found the position unsatisfying. Excluded from Washington's inner circle and given little influence over policy, he felt underutilized. He once described the vice presidency as the most insignificant office that ever the invention of man contrived, though he still fulfilled his duties diligently. During these years, Adams increasingly aligned with the Federalist Party, which advocated for a strong central government. He supported Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton's financial program, including the establishment of a national bank and the assumption of state debts. These policies helped stabilize the young nation's finances, but also fueled rising partisan tensions with the emerging Democratic-Republican Party led by Thomas Jefferson. Despite his frustrations, Adams' service as vice president helped shape early political norms and strengthened the office's connection to the legislative branch. By the end of Washington's second term, Adams stood as one of the nation's most prominent statesmen and a leading candidate to become its second president. The presidential election of 1796 marked a turning point in American political history. For the first time, the nation would choose a leader without the unifying presence of George Washington. The new political parties, Federalists and Democratic Republicans, competed fiercely, making the election contentious and deeply partisan. John Adams, the Federalist candidate, faced Thomas Jefferson, his longtime colleague turned political rival. Adams campaigned on the principles of strong national government, stability, and maintaining peace in a world torn by European conflict. Jefferson represented a vision of more decentralized government and stronger ties to France, which was now embroiled in war with Britain. The election process was complicated because presidential and vice presidential candidates did not yet run on unified tickets. Each elector cast 2 votes, with the highest vote-getter becoming president and the second highest becoming vice president. When the votes were counted, Adams won by a narrow margin, 71 electoral votes to Jefferson's 68. This result produced a unique and awkward situation. Adams, a Federalist, became president, while Jefferson, the leader of the opposition party, became vice president. The 2 men, once close collaborators during the Revolution, now represented sharply different political visions. Their strained relationship would shape the tone of Adams' presidency. Despite the challenges, Adams entered office determined to uphold national independence, preserve peace, and continue the constitutional experiment that he had helped design. His election represented both continuity with the revolutionary generation and the beginning of increasingly complex partisan politics in the United States. John Adams's presidency unfolded during a period of intense political discord. At home, the young nation was grappling with economic instability, regional divisions, and the rise of competing political parties. Adams, a staunch Federalist, sought stability above all else, and many of his domestic policies reflected his desire to strengthen government authority while preserving constitutional limits. One of Adams's immediate challenges was navigating the bitter rivalry between Federalists and Democratic Republicans. The Federalists, led by Alexander Hamilton, favored centralized government and broad national power, while Jefferson's Democratic Republicans emphasized states' rights and feared authoritarian tendencies. Adams attempted to serve with independence from both factions, but his desire for nonpartisanship often placed him at odds with his own party. During Adams's administration, Congress enacted several laws aimed at reinforcing national security during a time of international tension. The most controversial of these were the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798. Intended to protect the nation from foreign threats and domestic subversion, these laws expanded presidential authority over immigration and criminalized certain forms of criticism against the government. The Sedition Act, in particular, generated fierce opposition. Critics argued it violated the First Amendment and was used to silence political dissent. Adams himself did not draft the laws, but his support for their enforcement damaged his reputation and contributed to his political decline. Despite these controversies, Adams also oversaw positive domestic developments. His administration strengthened the Navy, improved national defense, and maintained economic stability during a turbulent era. He insisted on constitutional governance, even when political winds pushed toward extremes. While his domestic policies remain debated, they reflect his lifelong commitment to law, order, and republican governance. Foreign policy dominated much of Adams's presidency, particularly the conflict with France, known as the Quasi-War. Though never officially declared as a war, it involved naval clashes, diplomatic battles, and escalating tensions that threatened to pull the United States fully into the European conflicts spawned by the French Revolution. Relations with France deteriorated rapidly after the Jay Treaty of 1795, in which the United States reached a peace agreement with Great Britain. France perceived the treaty as a betrayal and began seizing American ships. By the time Adams took office, diplomatic relations were severely strained. In 1797, Adams sent a delegation to France to negotiate peace. Instead, the envoys became embroiled in the notorious XYZ affair, in which French agents demanded bribes and loans before negotiations could proceed. News of the affair provoked outrage across the United States. Federalists demanded war, while Democratic Republicans suspected the administration of exaggerating the crisis for political gain. Adams responded by strengthening the U.S. Navy and authorizing defensive actions at sea. American naval forces won several victories against French privateers, boosting national pride. Meanwhile, Congress repealed treaties with France and authorized the creation of the Marine Corps and the Department of the Navy. The presidential election of 1800 was one of the most contentious and transformative elections in American history. The rivalry between Adams and Jefferson had intensified over the previous 4 years, fueled by partisan newspapers, ideological disagreement, and personal grievances. Federalists accused Jefferson of radical sympathies with the French Revolution, while Democratic Republicans condemned Adams as a monarchist who threatened civil liberties. Newspapers on both sides engaged in relentless attacks, making the election extraordinarily bitter. Complicating matters, Alexander Hamilton, once Adams's ally, openly opposed Adams's re-election. Hamilton believed Adams lacked consistency and feared that his independence threatened Federalist dominance. His criticisms divided the party and weakened Adams's campaign. The electoral results reflected the shifting political landscape. Adams and the Federalists lost significant support, particularly in the South and the emerging Western states. When the votes were counted, Jefferson and Aaron Burr, running mates on the Democratic-Republican ticket, won equal numbers of electoral votes, forcing the election into the House of Representatives. After a long and tense deadlock, Jefferson was finally chosen as president, with Burr becoming vice president. Adams finished third, losing the presidency he had worked his whole life to attain. Though bitterly disappointed, Adams accepted the results peacefully and departed the Capitol quietly on the morning of Jefferson's inauguration. His willingness to leave office without contesting the outcome helped establish a foundational principle of American democracy, the peaceful transfer of power. The election of 1800 marked the rise of the Democratic-Republican Party and the decline of the Federalists. For Adams, it signaled the end of his public career and the beginning of a reflective and influential retirement. In the final months of his presidency, John Adams faced a government increasingly controlled by his political opponents. As the Federalist Party prepared to relinquish power to the Democratic Republicans after the election of 1800, Adams and his allies sought to preserve some influence within the federal system. This effort led to one of the most controversial episodes of his administration, the appointment of the so-called midnight judges. In February 1801, shortly before leaving office, Congress passed the Judiciary Act of 1801. This act reorganized the federal court system, expanded the number of circuit courts, and created new judgeships. Adams quickly filled these positions with Federalist allies whom he believed would uphold constitutional order and counterbalance Jeffersonian influence. Among these appointments was John Marshall, whom Adams named Chief Justice of the United States in January 1801. Marshall would go on to become one of the most important jurists in American history. Adams's opponents accused him of using the judiciary to entrench Federalist power, claiming he acted out of spite for Jefferson's victory. Supporters argued that Adams saw a strong federal judiciary as essential to preserving the Constitution against the dangers of unchecked majority rule. On his last night in office, Adams signed commissions late into the evening, giving rise to the legend of the midnight appointments. Some commissions were not delivered before Jefferson took office, leading to the landmark Supreme Court case Marbury v. Madison, 1803, which established judicial review. Although controversial, Adams's judicial appointments had long-lasting impact. His choice of John Marshall alone shaped American constitutional law for generations. Adams later reflected with pride that the greatest gift I ever gave to the Republic was John Marshall. These final acts revealed Adams's deep belief in balanced government and his determination to secure constitutional stability as he prepared to step away from public life. After leaving the presidency, John Adams returned to his family home in Quincy, Massachusetts, where he spent the remaining 25 years of his life. Retirement offered Adams a chance to escape the political turmoil that had consumed much of his adulthood, and he embraced a quieter life devoted to reading, farming, and reflection. Despite withdrawing from politics, Adams remained a keen observer of national events. He followed the Jefferson and Madison administrations closely and wrote long, analytical letters commenting on constitutional interpretation, foreign policy, and the state of the Republic. His observations reveal a mind still deeply engaged with the philosophical foundations of American government. During these years, Adams devoted significant time to organizing his extensive papers and writing autobiographical reflections. Although he never completed a full autobiography, his letters and essays from this period provide profound insight into the founding era. Adams maintained a strong partnership with Abigail until her death in 1818. Their correspondence, though less frequent than during the Revolution, remained rich in affection, wit, and shared intellectual curiosity. The loss of Abigail deeply affected him. He described her as his best friend and the balm of my life. Adams also took great pride in the career of his son, John Quincy Adams, who followed in his father's footsteps as a diplomat, senator, Secretary of State, and eventually the 6th President of the United States. That a father and son both served as American presidents would remain a rare achievement in U.S. history until the Bush family 2 centuries later. In retirement, Adams cultivated friendships, welcomed visitors, and hosted conversations with younger statesmen eager to learn from one of the last surviving founding fathers. His home became a quiet but influential center of political and intellectual exchange. These decades of reflection softened some of Adams's earlier sharpness, but they left intact his unwavering belief in virtue, education, and civic duty, principles he hoped future generations would uphold. One of the most remarkable chapters of John Adams's later life was the renewal of his friendship with Thomas Jefferson. The 2 men had once been close allies during the struggle for independence, but political rivalry had driven them apart during the 1790s. Bitter campaigns, ideological clashes, and personal misunderstandings created a deep and lingering tension. The reconciliation began in 1812, largely due to the efforts of their mutual friend, Dr. Benjamin Rush. Believing that the 2 former presidents still shared profound mutual respect, Rush encouraged them to resume correspondence. Jefferson finally wrote the first letter, and Adams responded warmly, reopening a line of communication that would continue for the rest of their lives. What followed was one of the most extraordinary exchanges in American history. Over 14 years, Adams and Jefferson exchanged more than 150 letters discussing philosophy, politics, science, religion, the meaning of the Revolution, and the fate of the Republic they had helped create. Their letters showed both agreement and disagreement, but always with a tone of reflective maturity. Adams, more candid and earthy in style, often wrote humorously about aging, daily life, and his philosophical skepticism. Jefferson, more elegant and optimistic, explored science, architecture, and the nature of human progress. Together, their conversations mapped the intellectual terrain of a new nation finding its direction. Their renewed friendship stands today as a model of reconciliation and civil discourse. Despite profound differences, they recognized their shared legacy and the historical significance of their collaboration. Adams once wrote to Jefferson, "You and I ought not to die before we have explained ourselves to each other." And through their letters, they fulfilled that obligation. Their correspondence ended only with their deaths, fittingly on the very same day. John Adams lived to see the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, a document he had championed with such force in 1776. On July 4, 1826, a day of profound symbolism, Adams died at the age of 90 in his home in Quincy. His final hours were peaceful, surrounded by family and touched by reflection on the nation he had helped create. According to family accounts, his last words were, "Thomas Jefferson survives." Unbeknownst to Adams, Jefferson had passed away earlier that same afternoon at Monticello. The coincidence of their deaths on the nation's Jubilee celebration remains one of the most remarkable events in American history. Adams' passing marked the end of an era. He was one of the last living founding fathers, one of the few who had participated directly in every major phase of the nation's birth: the movement for independence, the Continental Congress, the struggle of the Revolution, the diplomacy of peace, the framing of early government, and the first peaceful transfer of presidential power. His legacy, though sometimes overshadowed by figures such as Washington and Jefferson, is profound. Adams's contributions to American independence, constitutional government, and diplomatic success were foundational. His unwavering defense of justice during the Boston Massacre, his leadership for independence in 1776, and his determination to avoid war during the Quasi-War showcased a statesman guided by principle rather than popularity. Historians now view Adams as one of the most intellectually rigorous and morally committed leaders of the founding generation. His writings, ranging from political theory to personal letters, provide some of the clearest windows into the ideological debates of early America. Adams left behind a legacy of courage, integrity, and devotion to Republican principles. His life exemplified the challenges and aspirations of a new nation struggling to define itself. John Adams occupies a unique and essential place in American history. As a revolutionary thinker, political philosopher, diplomat, and president, his influence permeates the political foundations of the United States. His life demonstrates how intellect, principle, and persistence can shape national destiny, even amid discord and personal sacrifice. Adams' most enduring contributions lie in his commitment to the rule of law and constitutional balance. His defense of the British soldiers in 1770, at great personal risk, showed his belief that justice must stand above passion. His leadership during the debates for independence in 1776 proved critical to forging national unity. As a diplomat, he secured vital foreign alliances and financial support during the Revolution, enabling American victory. His presidency, though often controversial, revealed Adams' devotion to peace and political moderation. His decision to pursue diplomacy rather than war with France likely saved the young nation from ruin. Even his most criticized actions, such as the Alien and Sedition Acts, reflected the intense pressures of a turbulent era rather than personal ambition. In retirement, Adams helped preserve the intellectual heritage of the Revolution through his letters and writings. His long correspondence with— That's all for now. Stay tuned for more. Thank you.